Work is changing. The question is, are you? Welcome to 99 Problems But Work Ain't One, the new podcast series from How Now that will help you prepare for the fast-changing world of work. I'm your host, Nelson Sivalingam, and I'll be talking to disruptive startups, contrarian thinkers, global leaders, and real game changers, and asking them the burning questions about the challenges we face at work. From scaling cultures and adopting technology to improving well-being and building fast-learning organizations that are prepared for the future of work, we get the insights, tactics, and actionable nuggets of knowledge to put to work. For too long, learning has been about giving people new and more information, but it hasn't been built around where the learner needs to actually apply that knowledge. In this episode, I'm joined by Bob Mosher. He talks to us about the 5 moments of need framework and how that can help you pivot to a mindset where you consider the workflow first and foremost. Bob also explains why traditional classroom training has gone unchallenged for so long, how to empower learners to use information when you're not around, why building skills should be viewed in terms of your performance and how you apply them, and so much more. So let's get into the 5 moments of need with Bob Mosher. Bob, welcome to the show.
It is about time, my friend. It is wonderful to be here.
I was going to say, a lot has happened in the world since we last spoke, but this is a conversation I've been looking forward to and trying to make happen. And we've managed to finally make it happen. So I'm super excited. And look, before we dive into the questions, just to set the scene, we are going to be talking about your framework, so powerful, that's being used by so many organizations and L&D teams, performance consultants around the world. The kind of 5 moments of learning needs. But before we go into that framework, I just want to take a step back to the origin story. All right. How did you land on these 5 moments of need and why 5? Just talk me through the process of what happened.
Yeah, there's been the debate about 5 and, are there 7? Are there, it's sort of like Kirkpatrick's 4 levels and the whole deal, I always make it very analogous to that. Right. And so point in time, I was a young developer designer in a wonderful learning organization in Rochester, New York. Very, very successful IT training company. 19 classrooms, just insane, tens of thousands of learners. And in Rochester, New York, that's a massive number, right? So it's highly successful, great stuff. And we decided to do a new model because we just felt the classroom was a bit guided. And we were getting feedback from our clients that it just didn't go enough. They loved our classrooms. I mean, we fell in love with our trainers. The lunches were terrific and all that great stuff, but once the honeymoon ended, there was some anxiousness around application, which was a wonderful conversation to have because that's why we do what we do. And I think we in L&D have to be really focused on this, that is our calling. It's not to make people happy or get 5s on evaluations or pass compliance tests or throughput in our LMSs. Those are neat means to the end. And so we developed this thing called, we branded it something called Learn Pro, like learning professional, trying to elevate the responsibility of the learner. And it wasn't quite going great initially. And so actually the founder of the 5 moments is my brilliant business partner, Dr. Con Gottfredson. And he came to us then as a consultant and he looked at our work and said, here's the thing. You're hitting bullseyes at the wrong target. And we were like, what do you mean? He goes, see, there's these moments when people are brand new to learning and when they want more because they have an understanding of something. That's training. And you guys, and we were award winning in it at the time. Whoever gave those awards out at the time, ATD and others, right? We had plaques in the foyer full of these things. And by the way, that was great. But he said, here's the problem with L&D's understanding of this journey is that's not what the learner goes through. The learner goes on to do some very difficult things that you're not journeying with them on. And they have to apply this stuff. All that you've dumped on them, they've got to apply it. That's going to change, by the way, quickly nowadays. And how do they keep up? And third, even if they apply it and they think they're good at it, they're going to screw up. They're going to have to solve. They're going to get put into places where they have to solve problems and approach something different than recall. They have to troubleshoot. They have to, which is a very different mental model. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "You're ignoring 3 of those." And we were like, holy cow. I mean, when he put it on the whiteboard, we sat there and went, oh my gosh. And by the way, this predated 70, 20, 10 and all this math we throw around.
Yeah.
But he said, here's the thing. If your clients probably send their folks to 40 hours or something of your classes, that's probably high. So 40 hours out of a 52 week, year, is not a lot. So what are you doing for them the other 51 weeks?
Yeah.
And I just remember my team sitting there going, holy cow. I mean, we're so removed from the reality of those that come into our beautiful building. And we do such a disservice leaving them at moments 1 and 2. And from me, that was the beginning of a really challenging on so many levels journey as in the States, a master's level educator. I have an advanced degree in education. And I tell you, Nelson, nobody in my postgraduate and postgraduate work said anything about the 5 moments.
Yeah. And just on that, Bob, on that kind of realization that you had in that moment where, you're seeing this on the whiteboard and you're really understanding what problem are you there to solve, right? And I think it's a challenging one. And I hear this in the conversations I have with different L&D teams, is when you talk about problem, often what I hear is L&D's problem, right? So rather than the organizational or learner's problem, what I hear is L&D's problem. So L&D's problem, actually, what they're concerned about is what is the most effective and efficient way of distributing this information I have, right? And therefore we now have the sage, right, on stage, and the classroom makes sense because actually you fill a classroom with as many people as you want, and someone broadcasts a message. That's probably the most effective way of getting it out there. And so how that shift where you were able to realize almost immediately that that's right, my job isn't to solve my problem, but it's to solve their problem. But it doesn't always happen that kind of quickly. So how do you enable that shift?
Yeah, it's a terrific question. Well, there's 2 audiences, there's 2 stakeholders that have to come along here. And let's start with the one that we care the most about, and that's ourselves. We have to realize that it is, and this is going to rock some people's world, because sometimes, change is not easy ever. And especially change that runs against, at least for me, I always try to speak from my journey on this, runs against some pretty steeped, what I thought was learning theory and other things that I had been taught. Like I said, I'd never heard of the 5 moments I heard about ADDIE. I heard about these other acronyms, right? And so, and I was very early in the e-learning journey of an organization, organizations trying to build that stuff, but we pivoted on moments 1 and 2. It was still how can we do new and more stuff digitally, right? Yeah. It was, and so for us, the big thing that we had to start realizing is, and we have to take a needs. In the end, our client is the learner. And so we have to know them better, and we have to look at them, if you candidly, almost like a marketer for Nike or for looks at how do I sell a product? And they don't say, I'm going to go out and force them to buy sneakers because we've got these 5 sneakers. We do great. And even if they want a different sneaker, no. We're going to make them use these 5 sneakers and figure out how to want them to use the 5. No one does that. No business survives in that world. And that's what we do. We've taught our stakeholders to come to us and say these words. I would like 5 days of training on blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right. And so 2 things have to change. Number 1, we have to pivot on apply first, not new and more. We have to, I always challenge IDs that go through our course and come to us to learn it and say, look, you have to stop. You have to say, look, how do I understand the workflow first and then build for the moment of apply, change and solve as best I can. And listen to this. And do as minimal amount of training as a part of that deliverable. There's always training. I want, and this is where Con and I, Nelson, sometimes are misunderstood. We are not bashers of the classroom.
Yeah.
Our concern is that, and again, in our journey too, it has carried too much burden, and we lead with it. We that's why, again, we got in trouble by numbering the moments.
Yeah.
Right. Because when you number something, it puts it in order. And it also gives it a priority. Yeah. Right. So moments 1 and 2 were new and more. And really the moment 1 is apply.
Yeah. And just on that, Bob, I really like the idea of, and I'm glad you're clarifying that around, this is not the death of the classroom, or you're trying to get rid of the classroom. And I think
No.
often, and I think often that's the misunderstanding, because it's using the classroom absolutely when it's necessary, where that is
Love
the
that.
right channel for delivering, or and for getting that across. And some people learn better in the classroom, right? So it's making,
and that's what's been so unfair to the classroom for years. I always say, look, the 5 moments doesn't bash the classroom. The 5 moments saves the classroom. How's that? Right. And so organization, we call it targeted learning, not that's, of course, you have to give it some name, right? Because classroom for too long, we overteach. I don't know any L&D professional, if you put them in a room quietly and say, look, do we overteach in the classroom? They're like, oh yeah. Do we cover too much stuff? Yeah. Are they too long? Yep. Do we put people in rooms, classrooms for too? Oh yeah. Do we do cognitive overload? Yep. I mean, all the answers to all those questions are yes. But if you're a one-hit wonder, what else are you going to do? Right. So the classroom needs to be freed to do what it does best. Right. And that is analysis, group experience, trial and error, coaching and mentoring, remediation, safe failure. These are remarkable things in learning, but cramming 50,000 PowerPoints and schooling something up, just dumping all the stuff in people that they, and again, I know, we practice in there. I'm not saying we don't do those things. It's not that it's not engaging, but my point is that those are new and more designs, not apply designs. Right. And so it has to be every deliverable we do, Nelson, has training in it. Every single one.
Just to, before we break down the kind of 5 moments, and for anyone who's not familiar with it, and just to set the scene for what it is, coming back to the kind of, how do you think L&D got away, or how it got away so long working in this fashion? Because just to kind of simplify it, right? If you're an organization and you're working by, let's just say, OKRs, or management by objectives, which has been around for a while, and so you're the head of people, or maybe you've got a seat at the table and you're reporting into C-level, I'm giving you an objective, right? So I feel like if you've ended up in a situation where you've prioritized just distributing information within the classroom, it probably has something to do with the fact that you were given the wrong objective in the first place, right? Some part, it's not just L&D's fault. It's
no.
Stakeholders. So why do you think it's been this way for so long?
Well, it's comfortable, right? And we're put in one at the age of about 5. There's a legacy here, right? And that people come to us with. They don't just discover L&D when they get to corporate. They've been in L&D since they were 6. And if I may, a fairly broken model. It's an agrarian. We put people in classrooms and we give them summers off, because in the old days they had to farm a field and harvest stuff. There was no educational prerogative to that, right? And yet we still follow that model to this day, so people can get to Disney in the summer. No offense to Disney, by the way. And so, but you guys, we do so much there's so much legacy in training, Nelson, that has just been going on for so long. We don't look back and go, wait, why did we do this in the first place? Why do we do it this way in the first place? And so if I've learned anything in my 38 years at this, is that turning that ocean liner around is super hard. And when you sometimes challenge the buyer, when someone walks in my room and says, I want 5 days of leadership training, my favorite question is why? And by the way, five. Why are you saying 5? You're obviously you're coming in saying that 5. It's like I always say, I don't go to my doctor and say I want 9 Advil because my arm hurts. But they walk into our building all the time pre-prescribing before they even know what the symptoms are. Yeah. Right. And so often when I push them back and say, okay, so, but wait a minute, you also want to take our leaders out of work for 5 days. That's a lot. It's going to cost the company a bit. So obviously those 5 days have to be valuable. Why do you think taking them out of work for those 5 days away from their employees and stuff is, and they look back at me, deer in a headlight, well, what else would I walk in here and ask for? Right. So there's so much legacy here and momentum behind the years, centuries of which how the learning in our culture has been done, that getting them to fault is on both sides. We nod our head and go, sure, I can do that. But they also walk in and go, I'd like a broken product please, which if I may be so bold, I think it is.
Yeah.
Again, not at the fault of the product, but in what we're asking it to do,
Sure. Yeah.
which is just so unfair.
And I definitely see that kind of prescribing your own meds example. We feel the same around just the RFP process, right? Because in it,
Sure.
you're going out to the market with a list of thousands of features that have been aggregated, not even curated, from various departments, and rather than going out to the market with a problem and letting the solution providers to say, actually, this could solve it. It's
right.
Not a learning platform, but it can solve your problem. And yeah, so
RFPs drive me crazy. They drive me crazy because half the time when we lose a lot, or I shouldn't say we lose some, because we come back and go, well, look, we're not going to answer this.
Yeah.
The way because if you read the first paragraph, where hopefully you kind of stated maybe the problem, or maybe at least what you want, we're not going to answer we're not going to come back with the questions that follow this, because that's not what we do.
Yeah.
So, right. And so there's a lot of re-educating and guiding here, because it gets in. A lot of learning folks say, Bob, how do you help change that dialogue? Well, it starts with listening first and questioning second. Not we jump to the answer fast, really fast. I've observed folks, Nelson, doing this, and they say, so let's talk about the class for just a second before we go there. And I'm like, stop. You use the word class. You said, let's talk about but guess what? You're in a box now. You're already in a box of the deliverable, right? And so we have to be so careful in our wording and how we question and guide our buyer to the solution they deserve.
Yeah.
Not their responsibility, Nelson. They're the buyer.
Yeah.
Right. I come to the doctor with the pain. I'm not the medical professional who diagnoses that and prescribes the answer. We have to do the same in our world, and we're just not as good at it as we should be.
For sure. I mean, I've been in a room, Bob, where a client said we'd want something with a bit of AI. That was literally the language, right? And it's exactly what you said. And you see this in sales often, which is the buyer, especially with L&D, doesn't buy every day, right?
No.
Whereas as a seller, we do sell every day. And so there is an element of hand-holding and nurturing and challenging the buyer, because they don't buy for a living, right?
Here's my thing. Let's step up and be professional about this, right? We are learning professionals. We are learning experts. We want a seat at the table. Well, hey, look, if you want those things, you have to behave that way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm too old to couch my words anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you want to be an order taker, one of my first things I ask people, because they say, my L&D team's been reduced to an order taker. I'm like, well, who allowed that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't guarantee. I guarantee you, your organization didn't say, I want an L&D team that's an order taker. There's two sides to this story here. So if we want to, when someone comes to us, let's get back to the medical example. A doctor is a learned professional that, by the way, remains current in their craft. I want them to come to me with the leading approaches and the leading thinking and the leading solutions.
Yes.
We're not good at that, right? We don't study our craft enough. But secondly, I want them to listen to me and then ask me questions, guide me to the thing. We don't do that enough. We listen for certain clues, we hear certain triggers, and we rat hole right away. We go right down that path where we should pull back and go, wait a second, they're coming to my department because I am a learning professional that knows the latest and greatest methodologies, technologies, and approaches. And so, they come in asking me for an old one or what the things I used to do. Terrific. I'm not going to just lie over.
Yeah.
I'm going to push back and say, well, you know what? Because I often hear sometimes is, well, aren't we kind of bashing we've been saying so long the classroom's great. We finally got the funding for the LMS, which took years and it costs hundreds of thousands. Aren't we kind of calling that thing bad now? Well, no, you're not. And by the way, maybe some things, yes, because we've moved on, but doctors don't use leeches anymore, right? Because at one time they worked, right? I mean, so we have to be able to take it on the chin and say, look, we are not, to your point earlier, we're going to still have some classroom stuff, the 5 days you think you're asking for, but but because of where we live today and what we've learned, we have to look at the classroom very differently and use it really well. So let me ask you some questions to to back off the deliverable a bit and help me better as a learning professional that you've come to offer you the optimum blend. There's that word that you need, right? And it's a brave new world.
Let's put our kind of listeners out of their kind of suspense and just tell hit me with what are the 5 moments of
we'll get to them quick. There are 5 moments of need, and sure, we can play around with a number and blah blah blah, but it's worked for me, right? And I'm also a big guy in this is a framework, by the way, and I'm really careful with my words. There are frameworks, there are methodologies, there are disciplines, and I think those are very different things, right? And so we've never cast the 5 moments as a methodology.
Right.
It is a framework with which to have a dialogue and a mindset about that you can then dig deeper into methodology, deliverable.
So
right?
Guiding principles, is that a fair?
It is. And those who understand the 5 moments as a principle-based framework do it well.
Yeah.
Those that think it's a rule, it's I got to have 20% of the 5 because 20 times 5 is 100, or no, you're gonna fail pretty miserably. But they are so. And again, everyone's justifiable, right? A learner, a performer needs to know new stuff. I don't know anything about brain surgery. I know the words, don't know anything. I could use some comeuppance in that. I could use some fundamental knowledge, right? Once I have a base knowledge of something and maybe some experience, then I may want to learn more new stuff. It's still new stuff, but it's more. But the difference is I should approach more a different way than new because you have context.
Right.
That's the fundamental difference between new and more. Highly misunderstood. People think more is just piling on more new stuff, and they often use a new design to do more.
Right.
More, right. Okay. So new and more. I'll also contextualize this. Those are, by the way, best served by training. There's your classroom. There's your e-learning. Those do a great job of supporting new and more. But here's the problem. There are 3 more needs that come right after new and or more or a part of, and that is I got to apply the stuff you just told me. I got to go from your classroom, your LMS, your whatever into my world of the workflow, and I got to got to contextualize it and nip and tuck it to do it.
Yeah.
That's right. It's not we use transfer a lot. I would argue it's not transfer, because transfer, again, to me, sounds very literal, right? No. Application is, I learned it in your classroom. I'm going to transfer it to my workplace, but then to apply it, I got to add a whole new layer of contextualizing to do that, right? Now, this is where and yet one of your questions, I know you kind of maybe jump ahead here, was how have the 5 moments evolved in some ways? Well, here's one is that change and solve are really, because we looked at them a lot harder since, a form of apply.
Yeah.
They are, but I think they are literal apply is I go from classroom back to my desk, trying to use the CRM, trying to sell, trying to lead, and I contextualize. That's recall, remember, and apply. That's really that thing. Now, if things change from what I'm still applying in the world of change, but unlearning to relearn is very different than going from a classroom to apply. There is no baggage. Change has baggage.
Right.
And it's the hardest thing for a learner to do, in our opinion, is of all the 5 moments, the hardest is change, because I know something already and I've automated it, hopefully. Right. So to unlearn, to then super hard, especially for adults, super hard. And then the last one is I get myself in trouble. The problem, the thing with solve, Nelson, is that the stakes are super high in solve. The other 4 moments, they're not so much, right? Change is stressful. I get all that kind of stuff, but solve means you're in a pickle. You've done something wrong and you've got to get out of that problem quickly. Imagine a customer service rep on a phone call with somebody who has taken him into a place they're not supposed to, or given him misinformation or whatever.
Right.
I've got to, the time, the immediacy, of that moment is very high.
Yeah.
And so, sure. Again, it's another moment of apply because I'm applying, but the context of change, the context of solve, make them very different. So new, more, apply, change, and solve.
And so on a more holistic level, Bob, how would I, as a L&D professional,
Yep.
take this framework and apply it to what I do on a day-to-day basis? At what point is it in the way I'm speaking to colleagues and employees to understand their needs? Is it the way I curate to curate? So tell me how I can take these principles and apply it on a day-to-day basis.
Brilliant question. I use it on all those levels, right? A lot of people, remember I got back to how do I change the conversation? I share the 5 moments with a buyer. There's nothing, there's no social jargon in the 5 moments. They're fairly pragmatic.
Yeah.
Right. And so when someone comes in again and says, I want 5 days of training, I go, well, can I just share something with you that we know through research and stuff that your learners have to work through to become leaders, if that's the question. You want leadership training, right? Or whatever. And then I share the 5 moments, new, more, apply, the whole deal. And I say, look, I have to architect a solution that meets those.
Yeah.
More actually wrong. I have to architect a solution that allows the performer to meet those, right? And so your training, the training you've requested is only going to meet 1 and 2. It's only going to meet, and it's going to leave the learner lacking in apply, change, and solve.
Right.
So can we talk about this a bit? And that it really creates a wonderful, because what I want to get them around to is apply. It is all about, come on, my gosh, we've wasted trillions of dollars in this world training people up on stuff they've never needed to, wanted to, or could remember to apply. Yeah. It's travesty, right? And so if we pivot first on apply and design for that first, that's where it shifts to the design side. When my designers sit down with one of our clients, we require that they pivot first on the workflow, which is apply. That's where it's being applied. You want 7 days of leadership? I need to understand the life of a leader. So I need to understand the workflow. And by the way, they have them. A leader follows a workflow leading a company, right? And so we're going to talk about that. What is it? And then we'll get around to how we might train them on something.
So just on that, Bob, we're going back to something you mentioned at the beginning around, when I asked, why has this lasted so long? And you said, because it's comfortable. It's easy to go to the classroom and stand at the front. And so to a L&D professional who's listening to this, and you've just said, you need to fully understand a day in the life of the leader, to really understand where are the pain points along this leader's journey, and to be able to design in a way where they can apply this in their workflow. And then a professional who's not done this before and been doing this for many, many years could be listening to this going, where do I even start? This sounds time consuming. It sounds expensive. So how do you tackle that?
Well, let me run a couple of those things you just said. First of all, it's not time consuming. I can do is if I may, to give it some context, we call it rapid workflow analysis. It's the first thing you do because you have to notice the word rapid. You have to understand, if you cannot do 5 moments until you understand the context of apply. If you don't know that, you can't apply the principles. You just can't, because you're guessing, right? And when I did my first RWA, Nelson, I remember losing sleep that night because my first aha was, holy cow, I've been designing, and I fell in the 5 moments about 15 years into my career. So I've been doing a lot. I've been doing a lot of it. And so I lied in bed that night going, holy cow. And I thought back of all the training I've trained on and written, and thought I had no idea what the learner went back and did.
Yeah.
Not an iota. I knew what an SME felt they should know.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew what an SME thought was important. And I can tackle that one in a minute, but because that's also part of our problem. But so I got up in front of a classroom and said, I'm going to teach you spreadsheets. I'm going to teach you leadership. And having no idea what leadership was for that person or what spreadsheets were when they went back to their jobs. That was their job. Well, guess what? They do it badly. Their ability to jump from a 5-day of anything to apply is really, really hard. They don't do it really well. So, so it really is a way of shifting to design for apply. It sounds almost simplified, but design for apply first. Yeah. Understand the workflow first, the tasks, the supporting knowledge, and the steps that that do those tasks. And then once you understand that, the deliverable becomes very, very clear in what you have to build.
And just to get an idea, Bob, of what great looks like, right? So in your time kind of sharing this and seeing people put this into practice, can you share some examples of what good designing for apply, change, or solve looks like?
Yeah. I have to be careful with brands because I don't.
Yeah, just give us context of how.
Yeah. So let me give you from a very large services company.
Yeah.
The global services company. They had an onboarding program that took 18 months to do, and high attrition. Obviously, very, very low time to competency because 18 months is a long time. Very exhaustive of the coaches. They had a very big coaching back end of this thing. And so on. They took that because, again, that's a new more model, heavy coaching, heavy mentoring. And the thing about mentoring and coaching programs is that I see two kinds. They either are designed to keep people in them and dependent on their coach and mentor, in this case for 18 months before they dared let them try anything on their own, or they are enablement programs, meaning that the mentor and coach's job is to teach that coachee to be self-reliant as fast as possible. Those are two very different mindset approaches to coaching and mentoring.
Yeah.
And their coaching was the first one. It was, God forbid we let them touch anything or do anything or get in front of clients until that mentor signs off on them being really, really proficient. And guess what? That stretched it out forever because they just didn't let them fly. They didn't push the bird out of the nest, right? They were, and so they were too reluctant to let them do anything. Yes. So they built, and this is a pivot. We can get to deliverables. They built an EPSS first, an electronic performance support system first. They built a tool that sustains the 5 moments, both in the classroom and in the workflow. That is the new deliverable in my world. I don't build courses. I don't build books anymore. I don't build binders anymore. I don't, because books and binders are great in class, but they're ridiculously outdated and hard in the workflow.
Yeah.
Again, another huge epiphany for me now. So I was like, oh my God, we give them a tool in class that, by the way, makes class go great. And they feel really good because it's guiding and everything's in there, that when they go back to the workflow is so irrelevant.
An example comes to my mind, Bob, where we were doing a bit of work with this high street retailer where all of their stores, and the deliverable was literally a physically printed manual. So for anyone reverting back to access knowledge, if they wanted to go back, it was this. And it was because it was so much effort to be able to update and print all these manuals and send it back out to the stores. They did it every so often.
Let's just talk about usability. So that's on us, right? Maintenance is tough. Walk through a building any given day. I dare you. Walk through a building and look how many manuals are on desks. Just go around, walk around, see how many manuals are open on people's desks that day, meaning they're using it. If you find one, good, you'll find them on bookshelves behind their desk or in these big closed things that are above their desk, and they've got 1.5 inches of dust on them because they were all marked up and they bent the corner and they put Post-its on them and stuff in class, but they went back and they got in the workflow and a problem approached them. And they went, oh, my Lord, where in that 500-page manual is this?
Yeah.
And right. So again, these are huge ahas for me in my career. Why? And one of our clients tested on this early on because we were kind of talking about binders. And she said, look, I got to be honest. Why would I allow into any classroom a tool the learner can't use realistically back on the job? And this was a retail environment. So they said, we don't want people pulling out binders when they're selling somebody a TV.
Yeah.
We just don't. Right. And it's not practical. They just can't do it. So we have to use a different tool in the classroom, even though the binder might feel comfortable and common, that when they get back, because my mom was a career educator, and she said, Bob, you, as an instructor, you have to realize you have 2 responsibilities in the classroom. Clearly, one of them is to get through your content, whatever the outline is. But the second is to empower and teach your learner how to use that information
Mm-hmm.
when you're not around them anymore.
Yeah.
We missed that second one a lot. Right. And so that was when the binder hit me in the face, because holy cow, it's comforting to me in the room and it guides the flow, but I'm really giving them, and in the class, and sit right in the middle of when they sit down at their desk, they put their name in it when they sit down. We're telling them this is the panacea of getting through this event, this training. But then they leave and go back to the workflow and go, well, thanks for nothing, because I'm struggling using this thing. And by the way, to your point, half of it's out of date now, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love, Bob, about the framework is the focus is better performance, right? And I know you
all the time.
I know you talk
all
about
the time,
and you've got your podcast series as well, Performance Matters, and it's interesting because especially apply, change, and solve is in essence all of those moments of need are geared towards better performance today, right? Because it's about me using what I've essentially learned and putting it into practice. So does it concern you when what we're seeing as a more kind of macro shift is learning cultures within organizations are changing, slowly but surely are changing, but they seem to be moving in the direction of what I would call skills-driven learning. So it's this idea of learning to build skills that in essence, and that's why you're starting to see, the requirements of platforms, there's a merge between learning and career mobility and board talent management, which we, look at it, and there's slight concerns we have. And our concerns are really, the behaviors around kind of signaling and tying learning to career rather than, because then I think what you'll end up with is more of new and more, because people are trying to rack up the skills to signal that they're ready for promotion. But what happens to applied charts? So what's your take on that shift?
Well, here's the thing. No one should ever be promoted because they have a lot of skills. I got an A+ in accounting, an A+, but you don't want me doing your taxes. Right. I mean, I was schooled up. I was the best. I was the top seat in my class in accounting. I had a lot of skills. I've been taught a lot of skills. I could not apply those to doing your taxes to save my life. Right. So piling up a resume, you should be judged on performance and your ability to continue to perform and your ability to be agile, to learn new performances as the world changes around you. That skill, if you want to use that word, is what we have to teach the workforce of the millennium, because change is a constant. The pandemic threw us into it times 2000, right? And so those that are surviving are not those that can memorize or go to another e-learning. They're the ones that adapted quickly, right? That had the skills to adapt to the performance need of the day. And the L&D departments that I think are thriving are the ones that realize their job is to surround learners with tools to adapt, not tools to inform.
Yeah.
There's a significant difference in that.
Yeah.
Right. So just sending out the latest SOP because something changed, that's informing.
Right.
Putting it in the framework of the workflow and how that SOP affects performance and therefore should be accessed and read and applied. Very different approach to supporting and learning.
Talking about the pandemic, I mean, we couldn't have wrapped this up without speaking about the pandemic. But what do you think L&D have done well in this pandemic? And what are you concerned about with this kind of returning back to the office movement? What L&D might lose out on? What's your thoughts around that?
Okay, here's my favorite thing about the pandemic, and it's virtual instruction. We finally got funding. Tools that people couldn't get stood up in their organizations, Zooms and others, they couldn't get were bought in weeks, days, because we shut classrooms down. Okay, but I want to be careful in my answer here, my friend, because I'm not a technology guy per se. Again, I think it's the hammer to carpentry, right? I have to have a hammer to be a carpenter. So I'm not knocking the tool, but just give me a hammer does not make me a carpenter.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I just did another webinar on this before I came to here, is that the learnings out of that virtual pivot, I think can be remarkable for us, whether we go back to live classrooms or not, because what it taught us was You can't put people in virtual instruction for 6 hours over 3 days in a row. Can't do it. People wouldn't do it. So what do we do? We did some things we should have been doing to learning, period. We chunked it down. We only covered things that we should cover, not everything. We gave them homework. We gave them stretch assignments and homework and coaches to expand their learning and maybe learn some things we didn't cover in class because they could learn them. These, by the way, these aren't pandemic theories. The pandemic forced us into approaching these things.
Yeah.
And so my wish for our industry is that we don't rubber band back. My biggest complaint about our business is when we get 2008, right? The financial crash forced us out of a box. But darn it, as soon as financial markets rose, what did we do? We started building brick and mortar universities again and snapped right back. Yeah. And I hope we don't do that again here, because we've had some remarkable learnings. The learners gone with us because they had to, right? This aligned a lot of things that we've not been able to in the past. And so we sit with this remarkable opportunity to emerge very differently. But the window's going to close fast. And if we revert back, oh my gosh, because I do think that there's a different learner out of this.
Yeah.
And they're not going to come back to 5 days of anything. They might like it because it's social, then they miss social, but that's not long lasting.
Yeah.
Right. They've survived in remarkable ways, whether they realize it or not. And they've learned to be more self-serving, not selfishly self-serving, but to serve their needs better. They've learned to be more courageous. They've learned to be risk takers, maybe in painful ways, but they have learned these skills because they're surviving.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to allow us to go back to that comfortable thing again, because they just are going to demand more because they know they can handle more.
Yeah. I mean, I often talk about it internally with our team. I'm a big believer in forcing functions, right?
Yes.
And sometimes the right forcing function drives the behavior that was right all along. And the pandemic, right, especially within an L&D context, has been a forcing function, right? Because like you said, yes, people have just basically cut back to actually what they needed in the first place without the comfort of luxury of time and resources to do whatever the hell they wanted to do.
And we have to be careful of equating the fact that people want to rush back to a face-to-face life.
Yeah.
That means we should go back to face-to-face classrooms as right. Yeah, that has a social component. I get it. But oh my gosh, it's again, this gets back to the elephant in the room conversation we had like half an hour ago.
Yeah.
Too much, too fast, all that stuff is still there, sitting there.
Yeah.
And we have to do it better. We have an opportunity to do it better.
One last question before we go into the quick fire round, Bob. If I'm an L&D professional listening to this, not just L&D professional, because I actually think any people manager can apply this framework.
Absolutely.
Right? It doesn't just have to be L&D. And so if I'm a people manager or an L&D professional, what's the one thing I can do this week to improve our learning culture, or the way we learn in our organization?
A lot of great stuff's been made in the last 14 months by the learners themselves, because they don't come into a building, they don't meet in meeting rooms, and a lot of their intrinsic support framework was ripped out from underneath them when they were told to stay home. And so they have made, Nelson, some remarkable things on their own or with the help of a buddy, or on Teams or something else, that we could use and mine in the moment of apply. This is another thing I tell learning professionals: the burden's not on us in this world. Mm-hmm. The burden's on us in new and more. But when you get into apply, solve, and change, all we're doing is brokering, is the word I use, or aggregating stuff that's already out there that's terrific that people can't find. Right. So something you can do right now coming out of the pandemic is do what I call a learning, again, it has to have a name, a learning asset analysis. Go out to your learners and say, look, in the last 14 months in sales, or in just, be as specific as you want, can you share with us as the learning L&D team, did you make any cool job aids? Did you make any great assets? Did you create it? Did you stand up a community of practice? Did you, and because those are low-hanging fruit, Nelson, that are lying there right now for us to re-aggregate back out. The thing is, Bob Mosher sitting in Fort Mill, South Carolina, and made some great nugget, but Mary Smith in the Philippines has no clue.
Yeah.
Right. We can re-aggregate that stuff out and not to make anything.
Yeah.
Just right. Just take note of that. Now, what's going to follow quickly after is that'll give you a bump and it's nice. But then the same reason LMSs came along, someone's going to say, wait. Can you start adding some semblance to this and some order to it and some great. That's the question you want to ask next, because then you can have a different conversation around technology and tools. But right now, the great service you can do to the organizations you support is pull out the nuggets. Find the great things that were made, not by us, but by learners in the flow of work.
Yeah.
That solved a performance, not a knowledge, a performance problem, and just share it with be the aggregator, and you'll be all of a sudden become a rock star because you're known as this group that brings these remarkable performance things.
Yeah.
That I wasn't aware about and lifted my group.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we want to do and be known for doing?
I love it, Bob. We're going to go into our quick fire round. I'm going to throw some questions at you, Bob, and you could give me a relatively quick answer. I won't hold you to it. Is there one book you've read and would recommend to people working in L&D?
Wrote in 1991 by a woman named Gloria Geary. It's called Electronic Performance Support Systems. 1991, old book, but I've read it 4 times. It is a must read for anyone in our business.
Okay. You host the Performance Matters podcast and recently reached the 50th episode milestone. Congratulations. Incredible achievement. What have you learned from hosting the show, either from a guest or just from the collection of conversations you've had?
Yep. That change in learning is hard. Super hard. And it's not a tool thing. It's not introducing a new trendy thing. It's learning is a DNA thing of any organization, and it has history and legacy.
Yeah.
And if you want to change to the 5 moments, you have to understand change management as a discipline, not just master the principles and write a new course. That's everyone who's done the successful that I've interviewed understood the heavy lifting around change involved, not just the methodology.
I'm going to throw in a hard question there, Bob, but out of these 50 episodes, let's just say we've got a listener who's not listened to any of those episodes, wants to start any particular episode you tell them to start with.
Wow. Boy, well, there is one on what is workflow learning. That's kind of a 101 one if they're there. But my favorite are the pragmatic ones, the people that so I either the Hartford, although some others will kill me because I'd love to name them all. But I think the Hartford or McKinsey, those two are they'll learn so much about this by hearing practitioners talk about it.
Sorry, but that is an evil question. I really hope no one asks me that question. What's the one piece of advice you'd give L&D professionals for just selling and marketing themselves and what they do to the business better?
Listen. Good salespeople listen and ask questions. They don't force a product on a buyer, and that's what our whole conversation has been about that. Right today, we're too ahead of while they're coming to us. We've already got the outline written. Stop it. Listen and ask good questions.
What do you know now that you wish you knew at the start of your career, other than the 5 moments of need?
Yeah, that the workflow that I didn't understand the workflow. I was too wowed by SMEs.
Yeah.
And their girth of knowledge and so I went in thinking that I had to make everybody them. And boy, if I use less and less SMEs in my design, Nelson, all the time, because as wonderful as they're not the people that we're targeting people who want to be them. Right. So it starts with, I wish I understood the importance of backing off content first and understanding the workflow that I'm supposed to design my solution for. I'd been on a completely different trajectory from the beginning.
What's the biggest L&D myth?
Learning styles. but yeah, it's come on, it's I don't want to hear I'm visual kinesthetic or any of that kind of stuff anymore. It's bunk.
Yeah.
It's been debunked a zillion times. So that's when we got to let go. But I think the other one is that that it's about our content and I don't. It sounds like I'm saying L&D people are selfish, but they care so much about that, Nelson, because they're such wonderful people, and they want to help so badly that they want to prescribe the Advil before they know what the hurt is.
Yeah.
Right. So the biggest myth is let's stop leading with training. Let's get out of our comfort zone. And something you said beautifully earlier, let's back off and be those learning professionals and not be afraid to ask questions, not be afraid to not know the deliverable just yet.
Yeah.
I think we feel we're letting people down if we don't. But that's the myth of lifting up our responsibility in moments 1 and 2 too high. If you ask a learner, they don't rank 1 and 2 in the top 3.
Yeah.
Right. We've asked learners about the 5 moments and they unanimously pick either apply, change, or solve. They don't say, oh, no, I want more training and more.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes sense. What's the one skill you'd love to develop, Bob, and why?
Oh, my gosh. Do they have to be learning?
No, it could be any skill.
I want to be a better golfer.
How good are you, Bob?
I'm mediocre, but here's the thing. Why I think it's important is because it takes practice.
Yeah.
It takes a lot, like anything, right? It takes a lot. I guess the thing I'd like to be better at is practicing. I'm old. I'm 60 years old, and we get tired of practicing as you get older, or you get better at something. I think that's the danger of being an expert, is that you kind of start reading your own press. Right. And I think that you get there because you practiced, because you failed, because you took the time to become an expert. And I don't think it's something that happens overnight, but I think gradually, and so I'd like to be better at remembering the importance of practice and that failing in practice is okay and getting better at stuff.
Bob, I think that's a great note to finish on. It's been an absolute privilege and really, really enjoyed our conversation, as I always do. Thanks once again for coming on the show, Bob.
You as well. My pleasure. That's it. Hope it goes well.
And that's a wrap. Hopefully there's plenty for you to apply in moving to that apply first mindset and using the 5 moments of need framework. If you'd like to learn more about Bob or the framework, head over to the links in the description. That's also where you'll find everything you need to reach out to myself or the How Now team. If you enjoyed this episode, please do think about subscribing, sharing, leaving us a review, or telling a friend. It goes a long way in helping the show grow. Thanks, and see you next time.